Tower fire. Inspectors have found cracks in the walls, which mean the block is at risk of collapse if a gas explosion were to happen. Well, the gas supply has been cut off, meaning residents can't cook and they can't shower. Safety checks have been taking place in high-rise buildings across the UK following the fire at Grenfell Tower in West London in June. Southwark Council has now ordered urgent works on 4 blocks on the Ledbury Estate in Peckham, saying that the safety of its residents is its absolute priority. Residents have sent us videos appearing to show large cracks in the walls of their flats, and some residents say they've been raising concerns for years.
Our blocks, and our flat in particular, as well as many other flats it turned out to be, has got big cracks down the walls, down the sides. If you lift the skirting boards up, you'll find them down there as well, along the ceilings. And the question was asked was, will the flat be compartmentalised if in case of a fire? Will the seal box theory work? And we were told it wouldn't work.
I really worry. If I hear any news or something like that, I just think maybe can falling down the building, and really I'm worried.
It's very difficult because I've been in this building for over 23 years. So I find it very difficult to just, I've already used it, particularly the area and then the community, you know, it's very safe for us to be here in this building. So if we leave now, then my concern, I don't know where am I going to, is it going to be safer for me again, you know.
The local MP, Harriet Harman, visited the estate in the past few hours and was asked if she would apologise to residents who'd been reporting problems for a long time.
I'm really sorry for the situation that the residents are facing. You know, the level of anxiety and worry and uncertainty for the future is absolutely awful for them. But I think the council are doing their best, and they have been commissioning advice from the experts, they've been commissioning advice from engineers, from fire experts. So I think that the council are doing everything they can, and I'm backing them up in doing that. But I think that we need to be saying to the government, where are you to help a council where there's an unprecedented situation? The government need to step in and help.
The Sky's Charlotte Lomas has this update now from the estate in South London.
Residents of the Ledbury Estate here in South East London are naturally worried. Some are extremely frightened to remain inside their tower blocks, and others are confused as to exactly what happens next and where they will live once the repair work to strengthen this building takes place. Work that we now know should have taken place decades ago. Now, the situation at the moment is the residents inside those 4 tower blocks, their gas has been turned off, which means they have no hot water, no heating and no cooking facilities. Southwark Council has provided some of the residents with electric cookers, and they've told residents that they can have a free shower at a leisure centre nearby, but residents have told me that's a 15-minute walk away or a 2-bus ride journey. So you can imagine the frustration here, and also I have to say anger among some of the residents who say they've been trying to highlight concerns that they have had about cracks inside the building for years, and they say it's taken the tragedy of the Grenfell Tower fire for them to be listened to. And it has to be said that this development, these safety concerns over the gas in this tower block, this could have major implications on other tower blocks, not only here in London but throughout the country. The Ledbury Estate here is built in a similar way to that of Ronan Point in Newham. This was a tower block that partly collapsed in 1968 due to a gas explosion, and afterwards the building rules and regulations, it was said that other similar buildings would have to be strengthened so they weren't vulnerable. Now, when the residents here, they identified the cracks in the building, and they had engineers that came in to look at those cracks. It was during that investigation only recently that the engineers identified that strengthening work that should have been done in the 1960s, in the early 1970s, didn't take place. So there are huge questions that do need to be answered, and also we're questioning the strength and integrity of the building rules and regulations that took place so many years ago. And as I say, this could have a wider implication for the rest of the country.
Well, joining us now from Manchester to discuss this further is Nigel de Noronha from the Department of Sociology at the University of Warwick. Nigel, thanks a lot for joining us this afternoon. So strengthening work was ordered on the estate after a gas explosion in 1968. How surprised were you to hear that this didn't take place?
Well, I'm amazed. I mean, Roland Point was such a big event in social housing. It was the beginning of building tower blocks, and the pictures are still horrific to look at, and for this work not to have been done seems to be criminal.
What do you think of the council? They say the safety of our residents is our number one priority. Do you think they're acting in that way?
Well, in terms of maintaining their physical safety, but it does feel that ignoring complaints and requests for investigation of the cracks over a number of years is a significant failure of the council or the housing authority. I'm not sure of the housing arrangements there.
Well, that was my question. I mean, who would be responsible for making sure that that this strengthening work happened in the 60s, and then for the subsequent checks?
In the 60s, it would definitely have been the council. They may have transferred their responsibilities to a housing association since, but in effect, it is council-owned properties where they have a level of responsibility for their residents.
So do you think that this is going to spread wider, and do you think that the real issue here is that it's social housing where we're seeing again and again concerns of the residents are not being even heard, really?
I think there's two things. I mean, one is the build quality of these tower blocks. They weren't designed to last forever, and they're coming near to the end of their life. They haven't been maintained. Public finances have not kept the conditions of the buildings as they were when they were first built, and that's compounded by the apparent refusal of some authorities to engage with their residents.
Logistically, they're going to have to move, or they're saying that they're going to move people out of 242 flats. You simply can't do that overnight. Logistically, what do you think they can do? And do you think that what they're doing is actually enough? They've switched the gas off. They've said, listen, if you need showers, they're down the road. Here are hot plates to cook on. Do you think that is enough?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think my my housing insurance would cover me to be put up in a hotel if I had a situation like that in my property. And I think that's the least that people can expect, is to have a level of comfort and accessibility to the things that they need around them whilst this is sorted out, rather than a kind of here's a burner, you can cook some food, there's no heating, there's no water, walk 15 minutes down the road, according to your earlier report. It doesn't seem...
Do you think that they should be moved out permanently into other permanent housing, and these blocks of flats done away with completely, or should they be re-looked at in terms of their safety? These people should be moved out and then moved back into those blocks.
Well, I think that depends very much on how people feel. There's a combination of kind of trusted expertise which says what state those blocks are in and how much it would cost to repair them, make them safe. But there's also the way that people feel about living in those blocks now. So some might feel there is a real loss to the community and the neighbours they have. Others might feel too scared to go in, and I think their views have to be taken into account very, very seriously in terms of what happens to people.
Do you think that there needs to be an overall look at how we deal with social housing across the country, and the onus shouldn't be on these little councils to have to deal with these issues as they arise?
Well, I mean, there is an inquiry into Grenfell Tower, and I know a number of the submissions to it asked for the scope to be widened to look at who was in Grenfell Tower and why social housing was seen as a place that that certain people ended up living in, why it was a residual housing solution.
Do you think that's enough, though?
Well, I think that the events here may well broaden either the scope of the Grenfell inquiry or require a much broader look. I mean, we're operating with a housing strategy which doesn't even recognise social housing at the moment. this government has done very little in terms of rethinking policy. It just seems to be going from crisis to crisis.
Okay.
Whilst that's their fault, they are responsible to find a way out of it, to identify solutions.
Okay, Nigel, thank you so much for talking to us this afternoon. Nigel Dunn there from the University of Warwick. More than 70 registered sex offenders from